And this is something very interesting you showed me before the show. And I hadn't heard about this before, but you want to amend the Constitution when it comes to redistricting, right?
Right. I've actually introduced constitutional amendments 34 and 35. The problem is I can introduce them as a legislator, but the Speaker of the House and the Senate President have such tight control of the Rules Committee, we'll never see these. They're never going to get in front of the public by passing them through the House and the Senate. There is one provision in the Illinois Constitution, though, that if the amendment concerns the legislative article, then citizens can sign petitions similar to what we see in California.
Like a referendum.
Yeah, it's an initiative form where by next May, if we can gather 280,000 valid signatures, which means you gather 500,000 to make sure that you have enough, it will be placed on the ballot, and the Speaker of the House and the Senate President cannot stop it.
And so what is it that you want to do?
Well, one of the frustrations a lot of Illinoisans have is the dysfunction of the Illinois General Assembly. And if we look back, a lot of people lay the blame for that on the cutback amendment that Pat Quinn led in 1980 that changed from 3-member districts with cumulative voting to a single-member districts that we have today. Before that time, we had never had a Speaker of the Illinois House serve more than 3 terms. Since then, we've had one leader serve 26 years.
Wow.
It's centralized power so much because with single-member districts, then the party structure, and particularly when you have very powerful speakers and minority leaders, they can control who runs. And if you challenge them, they'll knock you off the ballot. So the 3-member districts allows somebody to bullet vote. They get 3 votes instead of 1.
Okay.
And in, say, Chicago, where it's a heavily Democratic district, you can still elect a Republican if you can get 25% of the people to cast all 3 of their votes for a single person.
Okay.
And similarly, in Republican areas, Zeke Georgia was a great example. He was elected to represent Rockford under the bullet vote. He would never have won a head-to-head competition against a Republican in Rockford in the 1960s. There was no way that he would serve. So everybody has typically 2 members of the majority in their district and 1 member of the minority party in their district. So they can always have someone that they feel connected to and someone who can be independent.
So when you go in there on the ballot, what does it look like?
It will list typically 3 candidates from one party and 1, 2, or 3 from the other. And you can either cast 1 vote for all 3 of your parties, or you can vote 1.5 for 2 of them, or you can vote 3 for 1. You just mark 1 box, and then they get all 3 of your votes.
Okay.
Very simple mechanism. Voters are used to it. We had it for over 100 years here in Illinois.
Yeah.
The other 2 elements of the constitutional amendment, and it's not in final form. I'm working with a coalition in Chicago, and I'll get back to that. But the other 2 elements, a term limit of 6 years on all of the 4 tops, the Senate President, the House Speaker, and the 2 minority leaders. That guarantees
turnover.
Absolutely. They've got 6 years to get their agenda done, and then they know they're going to be off the stage. Right now, all they're interested in is continuing to stay in leadership. So power is what they're interested in rather than policy.
Sure.
The term limit causes policy to rise much above power. And the third element then is when we're drawing the district maps, instead of drawing a name out of Abe Lincoln's top hat and then that party gerrymandering it to control the General Assembly, what the state of Ohio has done is turned it around and said citizen groups can submit a map, we'll give them the software and we'll give them the census data, let them draw the maps that are compact, that are contiguous so you don't split counties or townships or cities, and competitive, so that the more districts that are close to 50-50, the higher your score. They turn it over to computer, the computer scores it, and the top 3 have to be, you have to select one of the top 3 scores. So it makes it that
That's kind of interesting.
In Ohio, they think that 12 out of their 18 congressional seats could be won by either party. And if a party in Washington is not governing well, the citizens of Ohio can change their delegation quite a bit easier than they can today. Right now, there are only 2 competitive districts. So even if it's a screw-up in Washington, we can elect 2 out of our 18. The other 16 are probably locked in because they've been gerrymandered.
Well, anything that we can do to change the status quo in Illinois. This is a state that does pretty much everything wrong, so just by changing it would help.
Yeah, the reform organizations, the League of Women Voters, Change Illinois, the voting rights organizations, they're all very interested, from the liberal to the conservative on the political spectrum. They are very frustrated because we had no ethics reform to any extent. The campaign finance reform went the wrong way. It gave more power to the leaders. It was a total screw-up in Springfield. They're not getting reform, and if the governor is sent to prison, arrested on national TV, and we still can't get any reform, there's something wrong with the system.
Yeah.
There's something wrong with the system.
No question. So, but you need hundreds of thousands of signatures for this.
And that's why I convened the first meeting a couple of weeks ago in Chicago with these interest groups. They were quite interested in the concept. Right now they're running it through the attorneys and through their boards of directors to make sure that we pass the Supreme Court. They have a very bright line test, so we have to draft it very carefully so that the Illinois Supreme Court doesn't throw it out.
Yeah.
But it's been done before. We think this is a chance for citizens to take power back into their own hands and to make it fair for both parties instead of, because both parties have gotten the draw, and what do? They tried to harm the other party rather than make good policy. They don't want competitive races. They like it when they know who's going to get elected ahead of time.
Good for guys like me, but bad for everybody.
It really is bad for the state.
So, speaking of politics, you are interested in higher office.
Right.
Are you running for lieutenant governor?
I'll be announcing next week, doing a fly around, and
that's cool.
I'm absolutely excited with the opportunity.
Yeah.
I think that Illinois is ripe for reform, and that this redistricting initiative is one of the highlights. What's interesting about the lieutenant governor's position is most of the statutory responsibility of the lieutenant governor tend to be downstate and rural issues. Runs the Rural Development Board, runs the Main Street program that many smaller communities use to keep their main streets going. It's a downstate position. I think I'd be a good match.
You're a farmer.
Yes, I still actively farm. So.
Well, thanks so much for joining us this morning, and good luck on your campaign. You say